Refugees were fleeing the face of war in Germany too. They were escaping from two Russian armies who were invading Germany in support of their French allies. The Kaiser was urged by his commanders to pull his forces back, but he would hear nothing of it. He appointed two new commanders, Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff, to stop the Russian advance. The Russian army was an enormous, outnumbering the Germans 4-1, but they were poorly trained and incompetently led.
The General Staff headquarters resembled more a gentleman's club than it did a military headquarters. After dinner, they'd have plenty of time for cigars. Most of the generals had plenty of time to write voluminous memoirs. And they had a really rather outdated notion of military strategy. They believed that the bravery of the Russian soldier would be enough to see Russia through.
Bravery was no substitute for modern weapons. Even in the first days, artillery shells had to be rationed. Some soldiers went into battle without a rifle. The Russian commanders, Pavel Rennenkampf and Alexander Samsonov, were not even on speaking terms. To bypass a 50-mile chain of lakes, the Russian generals split their armies in two. The Germans pounced on the opportunity. They moved their forces south, where they outnumbered and surrounded Samsonov's army at the Battle of Tannenberg.
The German machine guns were deadly, mowing down rows of Russians immediately as they raised themselves in the potato fields to fire or to advance.
Alfred Knox was a British military officer assigned to observe the Russian advance. Instead, he witnessed the annihilation of Samsonov's army.
Samsonov said repeatedly that the disgrace of such a defeat was more than he could bear. The Emperor trusted me. How can I face him after such a disaster? He went aside and his staff heard a shot. They searched for his body without success, but all are convinced that he shot himself.
What happened was that Samsonov could not stand the shame of defeat and took his own life. This is the only case in the First World War where one of the commanding generals in a major operation is killed in the course of that operation, and almost certainly by his own hand.
The Battle of Tannenberg was Germany's greatest victory of the entire war. 100,000 Russians were taken prisoner. 30,000 were dead.
The Russian commanders were trying to stop the German war machine simply by throwing at it a mountain of human bodies. The French military attaché consoled with the Grand Duke Nikolai, the commander-in-chief, over these losses, and Nikolai's response was, "It's an honor to make such a sacrifice for our allies."
However disastrous, the Russians had diverted German troops away from France. Blood would continue to be shed in the east, but the decisive battles would now take place on the Western Front.